All right, welcome to the class, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Settle in, because in today's explainer, we're going completely off the grid of the official ancient world. We are going to explore the secret underground world of ancient Greek mystery cults. These were highly secretive, voluntary organizations that offered these intense, life-altering initiations. And honestly, what actually went down in the dark of the night in these ancient sanctuaries is just fascinating. So, let's dive right into it.
Here's a quick look at our syllabus for today's geographic tour. We'll start by moving beyond the city religion, then hit Eleusis for the Torchlight search, head over to Samothrace for safety at sea, check out the Cabeiri for some wine and ecstasy, look at the sacred objects and souvenirs initiates took home, and finally wrap up with how all this secrecy created social unity.
Section 1. Beyond the city religion, a radical departure from the state.
Now, to really grasp how radical these mystery cults were, we have to look at the baseline of everyday ancient Greek religious life. Normally, you had polis religion, right? This was heavily controlled by the state. We're talking large, very public festivals that were strictly divided by gender and class. If you were a slave or a foreigner, well, you were largely excluded. But mystery cults, they flipped the script entirely. These were voluntary, highly secretive, and radically inclusive spaces. I mean, women, slaves, non-Greeks, everyone is welcome as long as you could pay the initiation fee and speak a little bit of Greek. It was this rare space for personal salvation that existed totally outside the control of the city. But here's the catch. You couldn't just walk in off the street. You actually needed a mystagogue. Basically, think of this person as your sponsor. Because these rites were highly secret, the root of the word mystery literally comes from a Greek word meaning to close the lips or the eyes, you needed an already initiated friend to be your guide. They would vouch for you, introduce you to the preliminary teachings, and kind of help prepare you for the intense journey that was about to happen.
Section 2. Eleusis, the Torchlight search. Let's look at agricultural wealth in the darkness.
So let's take a virtual field trip to the agricultural heartland of Eleusis. This was home to the oldest and definitely the most famous mystery cult of them all. And getting there? It was a physically grueling but ultimately euphoric journey. It kicked off in Athens with thousands of people assembling, followed by this mass purification ritual in the sea, where, yes, they actually sacrificed mystic piglets. Then came the main event, a 15-mile, dusty, incredibly hot procession on foot, all the way to Eleusis. Picture thousands of people rhythmically chanting Iakche o Iakche to invoke the god of the procession. Neurologically, doing this long rhythmic walk produced a state of absolute euphoria. Finally, exhausted but totally buzzing with adrenaline, they arrived at nightfall and entered this massive square building called the Telesterion for the two-night initiation.
Just put yourself in that room for a second. You're crammed in with thousands of other people, sitting on these stepped seats around the walls. The air is thick, it's sweaty, it smells heavily of extinguished torches. And it is completely, utterly pitch black. Everyone is just sitting there in awe and this terrifying silence, waiting for the high priest to start the mystic drama.
So what exactly did they do in the dark? Well, they took part in a massive passion play based on the myth of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, whose daughter Persephone was famously kidnapped by Hades. At one point, the initiates were literally sent outdoors into the night with torches to frantically search for Persephone themselves. Then eventually, the high priest, the Hierophant, would strike this massive gong. Boom! Persephone had been found. The initiates go wild, the room is suddenly flooded with blinding light. But here's the crazy part. The grand secret climax? It wasn't some long, esoteric speech. The Hierophant simply stood in silence and held up a single freshly cut ear of wheat. That was the whole shebang. But to the ancients in that room, this simple act was a profound promise of agricultural wealth in this life and a much better status in the afterlife.
Moving on to Section 3, Samothrace, Safety at Sea, Island Rites for the Anxious Sailor.
Now, if there's one thing to take away from this, it's that geography absolutely dictated theology in the ancient world. Look at this breakdown. At Eleusis, which is located in a mainland agricultural plain, the goal was all about fertility and the vibe was super serious. But if we turn our map to the island of Samothrace in the northern Aegean Sea, well, they're surrounded by unpredictable waters, so their primary goal shifts completely to safety at sea. And then further east, at the Anatolian interface with the Cabeiri cult, the focus shifts again to curing madness through this jolly, ecstatic trance. It's fascinating how much location drove the actual goals of these traditions.
Over at Samothrace, things ran a bit differently than Eleusis. Because this cult was geared toward anxious sailors, there wasn't just one big annual festival. You could actually just drop in and get initiated whenever your ship happened to sail by. Prospective initiates would pour liquid offerings into these very distinct conical bowls. Then they were told a highly secretive and, from what we can tell, pretty scandalous sacred tale about the great gods of the island. And rather than everyone just packing up and going home afterward, the whole event wrapped up with a really joyful banquet right there in dedicated dining rooms inside the sanctuary. It was incredibly communal.
Section 4. Cabeiri, Wine and Ecstasy, the jolly rites of the Anatolian interface. Okay, let's head east to the interface between Greece and Anatolia to check out some much wilder, rowdier customs. When archaeologists excavated the sanctuaries of the Cabeiri, they found Kantharoi, ancient Greek drinking cups. And not just a few. We're talking thousands upon thousands of them. This massive archaeological footprint proves one thing for sure. Heavy, and I mean heavy, wine consumption was absolutely central to whatever was happening in this cult.
The written sources totally back up the archaeology here too. This cult was famous for its heavy consumption of Lemnian wine. But it wasn't just a party for the sake of a party, it was deeply ritualistic. Initiates engaged in these frenetic, orgiastic dances that were explicitly designed to bewilder them and induce a deep state of trance. Often the goal was to cure mental distress or to serve as a coming-of-age ritual for young men. So if you compare this to the terrifying, solemn silence of Eleusis, the Cabeiri rites were a remarkably jolly, loud, and ecstatic affair.
Section 5. Sacred Objects and Souvenirs. Physical proof of divine protection.
So, what physical takeaways did initiates actually get to carry home after surviving these intense, sleep-deprived nights? Well, to put it in perspective, there's this fascinating mythological account about the hero Odysseus. It says that when his ship was wrecked in a storm, he used a divine veil in place of an initiate's fillet to survive the raging waters. It's a great myth, but it perfectly highlights how these physical souvenirs were viewed by the ancients. We're talking literal life-or-death stakes on the water.
So what were these objects? If you got initiated at Samothrace, you received a magnetic iron ring. Pliny actually wrote about them, calling them Samothracian rings, and they were this highly valuable physical proof of your initiation status. You also received that fillet we just mentioned, a purple strip of cloth. You were supposed to wear this tied tightly around your abdomen. Why the abdomen? Well, like the Odysseus myth implies, this was your ancient life insurance policy. If your ship started going down, you wore that purple fillet, and the great gods of Samothrace would theoretically save you from drowning. Other items, like those conical libation bowls we talked about earlier, were actually left behind in the sanctuary's theatral circle, serving as a permanent physical marker that you had been there.
And finally, Section 6. Social unity and secrecy. Community outside the confines of the city.
Let's synthesize all of this. How did these underground rituals function as a social glue? The official city festivals, as we covered, were incredibly exclusive, but by throwing their doors open in the dark of night to slaves, women, and foreigners, mystery cults forged a deeply shared community. I mean, think about it. When you walk 15 miles in the stifling dust, sit together in terrifying darkness, and then share the euphoria of a grand revelation alongside someone from a completely different social class, it creates a powerful bond. It offered personal salvation and a real sense of unity that you just couldn't find in the official daylight channels of ancient society.
I want to wrap up our class today with this thought. The ancient philosopher Democritus once said that a life without festivals is like a long road without inns to rest at. We humans inherently crave these shared, euphoric breaks from our everyday lives. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question. If these ancient mystery cults provided the inclusivity, the thrill, and the personal salvation that official ancient society lacked, what do our modern secret societies, our online subcultures, and exclusive communities say about what we might be missing in today's official society? Definitely something to think on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.